Habituation is a simple form of learning in animal behavior where an animal gradually stops responding to a repeated, harmless stimulus. It allows animals to ignore irrelevant background stimuli and focus on more important changes in their environment. Habituation is characterized primarily by a decreased response to a stimulus that is presented repeatedly without any reinforcement or consequence. In the context of animal behavior, this means that when an animal encounters a stimulus over and over again, and that stimulus proves to be neither harmful nor beneficial, the animal gradually stops reacting to it. This process is a basic yet essential form of learning that allows animals to adapt efficiently to their environment by filtering out irrelevant information. For instance, a wild deer may initially become startled by the sound of rustling leaves or passing cars near a frequently traveled road. However, over time, if these sounds do not pose any actual threat or consequence, the deer will begin to ignore them and continue with its normal activities like grazing or resting. This decreased response is not due to fatigue or sensory adaptation, but rather due to a learned understanding that the stimulus is not significant. The mechanism of habituation serves a critical purpose in the daily lives of animals. Natural environments are filled with a multitude of stimuli at any given time: sounds, movements, lights, and smells. If an animal were to respond to every single stimulus, it would waste valuable energy and time, which could instead be used for more crucial activities such as foraging, mating, or escaping from real threats. By learning to ignore stimuli that are consistent and non-threatening, animals streamline their behavioral responses to focus only on what truly matters. This efficiency in behavior is especially important for prey species who need to be highly alert to real threats but cannot afford to overreact to every minor or familiar sound. Repeated exposure is key in the process of habituation. The number of exposures required for habituation to occur can vary widely depending on the species, the individual animal, and the nature of the stimulus. Some animals may habituate quickly to a new stimulus. It is mild and presented frequently, while others may take longer, especially if the stimulus was initially perceived as threatening. Interestingly, if the intensity of the stimulus increases significantly, even habituated animals may react again, demonstrating that the learning is tied not just to recognition, but also to the perceived importance or intensity of the input. Habituation is classified as a form of non-associative learning, which means that it does not depend on the association between a behavior and a consequence, such as a reward or punishment. Unlike associative learning processes like classical conditioning, where animals learn to associate a neutral stimulus with a significant one, or operant conditioning, where behaviors are strengthened or weakened based on reinforcement, habituation occurs simply through repeated exposure to a stimulus. This form of learning allows animals to adapt to their environment without requiring any reinforcement to shape their behavior. The animal learns solely by the repeated presentation of a stimulus that neither benefits nor harms it, leading to a natural decline in its behavioral response. In non-associative learning like habituation, the emphasis is on the stimulus itself rather than any outcome or consequence that follows. For instance, if a dog hears a doorbell ring multiple times a day and each time nothing significant follows, no visitor enters, no food appears, and no danger arises, the dog may gradually stop barking or reacting to the sound. This learning is not because the dog has formed an association between the doorbell and a lack of reward or punishment, but rather because it has become accustomed to the stimulus and determined it is irrelevant. The behavior change results from the stimulus losing its novelty or significance through repeated exposure, not from any learned consequence. This kind of learning is seen across a wide range of animal species, from invertebrates to mammals, indicating that it is a fundamental and evolutionarily ancient mechanism. It helps animals manage the flood of sensory input they experience by reducing their sensitivity to unimportant or repetitive stimuli. Importantly, because habituation is non-associative, it can occur without any need for conscious thought or intentional decision-making on the part of the animal. Even simple organisms like sea slugs or insects display habituation when exposed to repeated touch or light stimuli, showing that even basic nervous systems can carry out this type of learning. Another key feature of non-associative learning, like habituation, is that it can occur quickly or gradually depending on the nature of the stimulus and the animal's individual sensitivity. There is no requirement for a behavioral outcome to be linked to the stimulus. Instead, the repetition itself is the driving factor. As a result, Habituation is often the first and simplest form of learning observed in young animals or newly encountered environments, laying the groundwork for more complex forms of learning that may follow. One of the defining characteristics of habituation is that it is stimulus-specific. This means that an animal's decreased response is typically limited to the particular stimulus that is repeatedly presented and does not necessarily generalize to other stimuli, even if they are similar. For example, if a bird becomes habituated to the sound of a specific car engine that passes by daily, it may stop reacting to that noise over time. However, if a different vehicle with a louder or differently pitched engine passes by, the bird may respond to it as though it were a new event. This specificity allows animals to finely tune their attention and behavior to the exact features of their environment, distinguishing between what is familiar and what may require a new or immediate response. The stimulus-specific nature of habituation serves a crucial role in an animal's survival. In complex and dynamic environments, animals are constantly exposed to a variety of sensory inputs. If they generalized habituation too broadly, they might ignore novel stimuli that could indicate danger or opportunity. By limiting habituation to a specific stimulus, animals maintain the flexibility to detect important changes in their surroundings. For example, a rabbit that becomes habituated to the sound of wind rustling through a particular bush will not necessarily ignore the sound of something larger, like a predator moving through the same bush, because the sound characteristics are different. This ability to differentiate and selectively respond helps prevent inappropriate or dangerous behavioral suppression. Stimulus specificity also plays a role in how animals prioritize information. Some stimuli, even if harmless, are more easily distinguished and thus more likely to be responded to if they are different from the habituated one. If the new stimulus is markedly different, animals often react strongly despite having previously habituated to something similar. In laboratory settings, researchers have demonstrated this by exposing animals to repeated tones of a certain frequency. When a tone of a different frequency is introduced, even slightly, the animals typically show renewed interest or response, indicating that their habituation was specific to the original tone. This specificity also reveals the sophistication of sensory processing in animals. It shows that habituation is not a result of simple fatigue or sensory overload, but rather a learned behavioral change where the nervous system actively filters out repeated stimuli while remaining alert to new ones. This selective filtering mechanism allows animals to maintain awareness without being overwhelmed, ensuring that only relevant information triggers a behavioral reaction. One important aspect of habituation is that it is reversible, meaning that if the stimulus is not presented for a certain period, the animal may begin to respond to it again, as though it were new. This phenomenon is known as spontaneous recovery. When an animal that has habituated to a particular stimulus no longer encounters it for a while, the response to that stimulus can return at full or partial strength when it is reintroduced. This indicates that habituation is not a permanent erasure of the response, but rather a temporary suppression that can be reinstated under certain conditions. The time it takes for spontaneous recovery to occur depends on the duration of the break and the characteristics of the stimulus itself. Spontaneous recovery shows that the memory of the stimulus-response relationship remains intact, but the behavioral expression of that memory is suppressed during habituation. For example, a fish in an aquarium may become habituated to the presence of a person walking by the tank and no longer dart away in fear. However, if no one walks by for several days, and then someone suddenly does, the fish may react again, at least initially. This reappearance of the response demonstrates that habituation is flexible and context-sensitive. The animal retains the capacity to respond if the stimulus reappears after a break, which may signal a change in its environment that requires reassessment. Reversibility in habituation is crucial for animals living in environments where conditions can change unpredictably. Just because a stimulus has been non-threatening in the past does not guarantee it will remain so in the future. Spontaneous recovery allows animals to reevaluate previously ignored stimuli if they reoccur after an absence. In nature, this might happen when seasonal changes alter the behavior of predators or when human activities temporarily stop and then resume. For example, a group of birds that has habituated to the sound of construction noise may startle again if the construction stops for a week and then resumes, suggesting that the birds interpret the reappearance of the stimulus as potentially significant. This reversibility also plays an important role in how animals learn and adapt over time. It ensures that learning is not rigid, but adaptable, allowing animals to retain sensitivity to changes in their surroundings. The nervous system does not delete the stimulus response pathway, but instead temporarily suppresses it, keeping the behavioral option available for future use if needed. The adaptive advantage of habituation lies in its ability to help animals conserve energy and focus attention on stimuli that are truly important for survival and reproduction. In any natural environment, animals are constantly bombarded with sensory information. Many of these stimuli are irrelevant or harmless, and responding to each one with a full behavioral reaction would be energetically costly and inefficient. Habituation allows animals to tune out these repetitive, non-threatening inputs, freeing up their mental and physical resources for more critical tasks such as finding food, detecting predators, securing mates, or caring for offspring. By ignoring what is predictable and unimportant, animals become better able to respond quickly and appropriately to novel or significant changes in their surroundings. In the wild, this selective attention is essential. A predator that reacts to every rustle of leaves or sound in the forest might expend more energy than it gains from its efforts. Likewise, prey animals that constantly flee from harmless movements would waste energy and reduce time available for feeding or nurturing young. Through habituation, animals learn to identify which elements of their environment can be safely ignored. For example, a zebra living on the African savanna may become habituated to the presence of non-predatory animals like wildebeests or giraffes moving nearby. This allows it to remain calm and avoid unnecessary stress, while still remaining alert to the approach of a lion or other predator that poses a genuine threat. Habituation also contributes to more efficient decision-making. Animals that are not distracted by unimportant stimuli can make quicker and more accurate judgments about what actions to take. In species that live in social groups, such as primates or birds, habituation helps individuals focus on key social cues from group members rather than background noise or repetitive sights and sounds in their environment. This can improve communication, cooperation, and group cohesion, all of which enhance survival chances. Moreover, habituation can help animals navigate environments altered by humans. Urban wildlife, for instance, often encounters consistent non-threatening human activities, such as cars, people walking dogs, or construction sounds. Animals that habituate to these conditions can continue their natural behaviors without disruption. This adaptability is becoming increasingly important as human activity expands into natural habitats, requiring animals to distinguish between harmless disturbances and real dangers. Habituation thus plays a fundamental role in helping animals live efficiently within their ecological niches by prioritizing their attention and behavioral responses. Habituation is a universal behavioral process observed across a wide range of species, from simple invertebrates to complex vertebrates, which demonstrates its fundamental importance in animal learning and adaptation. This widespread occurrence suggests that habituation is one of the most basic and essential forms of learning, deeply rooted in evolutionary history. Even animals with relatively simple nervous systems, such as sea slugs, worms, or insects, are capable of habituation. For instance, the marine mollusk Aplysia has been widely studied for its ability to habituate to repeated gentle touches. When touched repeatedly on its siphon without any harmful consequence, Aplysia gradually reduces its defensive gill withdrawal response. This simple form of learning has helped scientists understand the neural mechanisms behind behavioral change, even in organisms with only a few thousand neurons. In more complex animals, including mammals, birds, and reptiles, habituation plays an equally important role. Dogs may stop barking at a repeatedly heard doorbell when no visitors arrive. Cats may ignore the sound of a vacuum cleaner after being exposed to it multiple times without any threat. And wild animals like deer or squirrels may become desensitized to the presence of humans in parks or suburban areas. These examples show that habituation enables animals to adapt to stable features of their environment, improving their ability to function efficiently within it. The consistency of this behavior across species suggests that the underlying principles of habituation are conserved, even though the complexity of the behavior may vary depending on the animal's nervous system and ecological needs. In birds, habituation is often observed in their reactions to potential predators or territorial intrusions. For example, nesting birds may initially alarm call or dive at humans who come near, but if the humans pose no threat over time, the birds may reduce or cease these responses. Similarly, Laboratory rodents like rats and mice are frequently used in behavioral studies to examine habituation to novel environments. When first placed in a new cage or open field, they may explore actively and appear alert. However, after repeated exposure without any negative consequences, their exploratory behavior diminishes, indicating that they have habituated to the environment. The fact that habituation is seen in both solitary and social species, in aquatic and terrestrial environments, and in both domesticated and wild animals underscores its significance as a core behavioral tool for survival. It allows animals of all types to manage attention, reduce stress, and respond selectively to meaningful changes in their environment.